DT Global is an international consulting firm working as a contractor in partnership with communities, governments, and the private sector to deliver innovative solutions that are transforming lives. We launched in 2019, built on more than 60 years of experience of our legacy companies, AECOM, International Legacy, International Development Services Sector, Development Transformations, IMC Worldwide, and Cardno International Development. Our global team is more than 2,500 staff and experts. We're working in over 90 countries to impact over 500 million lives by 2045. Like all of you, we know that this impact is not possible to achieve without local partners. In November 2021, USAID announced 2 interrelated and very ambitious targets for localization. One, to ensure that 25% of program resources go to local partners by 2025. And the second, that programming would take place with communities leading the role by 50% of the time by 2030. As you know, this has been tried before, and it is easier said than done. But DT Global takes localization very seriously. We are leaning into the localization targets, and our approach includes very close engagement with stakeholders, fostering capacity building and strengthening local ownership in every aspect that we can. Today, we're going to focus on one project. We're going to focus on DT Global's USAID-funded Business Enabling Environment Project, BEP, in Zambia. And we're pleased to have with us today Shupi Mweene, BEP's Deputy Chief of Party, Kabwe Chishimba Chikolwa, CEO of a local Zambian organization, HYDRANGEA Enterprises, a local partner for the BEP project, and Harry Ngoma, USAID Food Security Specialist for USAID Mission in Zambia. He is also BEP's project core. Thank you for being here with me today. So for the next 50 minutes, we're going to talk about the opportunities and challenges faced by the effort of localization and how we can make localization a reality in Zambia. We'll open the conversation at the end to take audience questions. So please feel free to add your questions in the chat anytime. This is a very short workshop. So let's hear from the panelists, and we'll start with Shupi, where she's going to tell us a little bit about BEP, its goals, and its approach to localization. Shupi?
Thank you very much, Rosemary, and it's a pleasure to be here. So my name again is Shupi Mweene, and I'm the Deputy Chief of Party for the USAID Business Enabling Project, like Rosemary said. We're based in Zambia. The project is a $14 million project, and it started in 2022. It's a 5-year project. So we've done a year already, and it ends in February 2027. As you know, it's funded by USAID and implemented by DT Global. So that's about the overview of the project and what are the objectives. So from the name, as the name suggests, the project is all about improving, or what we'd say, catalyzing inclusive private sector growth in investment and trade through 4 sectors that we've prioritized. These are agriculture and trade, ecotourism, and sustainable energy. So those are the projects in which we operate. And how do we do that? How do we intend to increase investment in those areas? So we intend to do that by contributing to a conducive or enabling business environment, then the question is, how do we then do that? So we do that through 3 interventions. One is on policy and regulatory reform. The second one is we try to enhance public-private dialogue, because as you know, when you're doing reforms, it's all about the dialogue between the private sector and the government. Then the third one is through strengthening institutions. So those are the 3 interventions. And who are our key stakeholders? It's obviously government through ministries, departments and agencies, and the private sector through associations. So not directly through firms, because as when you're doing reforms, you need a collective. So we do it through business associations. Then the issue about localization. Just to put it in context, I've been in the development space for over 20 years now, and I've worked for several projects, donor-funded projects. And I know that in the past, the issue of sustainability, which is very closely related to localization, was usually an afterthought. And the other thing which was an afterthought, if you recall, Rosemary and Harry, is things to do with M&E and communication. So those would be looked at when the project is ending, like in the 5th year, then you try to figure out how you do sustainability. So for DT Global and the USAID project, I'm so excited that localization or sustainability is at the core of what we do. It's not an afterthought, it's front and center of what we want to do. And it's being done at the beginning of the project throughout instead of at the end. So we are deliberate and intentional about localization, and I'll show you the 3 things that we're doing to ensure that we have it throughout. So the first thing is that the approach we're taking is that we're looking at a market systems approach. So how are we doing that? We as a project are not the ones doing the actual work. We are partnering with Hydrangea, who will speak later on, and other partners like the government itself, business associations, consultants mostly. They're the ones that are front and center. Then us as coordinators and facilitators, we are at the back end, so that we, as we interact with them, as we facilitate, then after we go, then they won't miss us, if you will. They'll continue doing what we're trying to catalyze. So that's a systems approach we're taking. We're not crowding out consultants. We're actually working through them. So that's one approach. The second approach is what we have on the panel, Kabwe, with us, is that we're using local firms, local consultants firms. So some of them are long-term. We've started with them. So you can imagine after 5 years, they'll hit the ground running and they can get funding from USAID to do the work. So these 3 are helping us with IT, which is Pro-Base, FARA, and PMTC. They're helping us on institutional strengthening. These are long-term for the life of the project. That is one category. The second category is Kabwe, who will speak very eloquently when he comes on. Those are local, individual and firms that we're working with to do most of the evidence that is needed for us to do reform. And the third one is to do with local staff, and me being one of them. So intentionally, I'm at the moment a deputy chief of party, and in the next 12 months, hopefully, I will transition to chief of party. And I also have a colleague of mine who's in charge of monitoring and learning. He's the specialist who also transits to a director position. So these 2 positions are held by experts. And right now we're doing a lot of capacity building. On my side, just to give context, as I said, I've worked for so many projects, but mostly UN and these other donor, World Bank, but not so much USAID. So I come with the reform experience, but not, procurement processes and all these things that I need to know. So right now we're going through the learning so that come next year, I'll also hit the ground running. So Rosemary, those are the 3 things that we're doing under localization. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shupi. And the reality is that we need to take all 3 elements of this approach very critical. They're critical. the transition to all local staff, the engaging with local subcontractors and building their capacity, not just their technical capacity, but their operational capacity, because that's going to be very, very critical when they take on greater responsibility for upcoming projects. And the approach of being systems-based approach, which really enhances our role as facilitators, not direct implementers. So all three are very critical elements of our localization approach. Harry, the truth is that we wouldn't be here having this conversation with on localization if USAID Zambia wouldn't have adopted localization so strongly as it did. And maybe you could give us USAID's perspective and then talk a little bit about the operational challenges of meeting the ambitious targets that Washington has set for USAID throughout the world.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. Good evening and good morning, wherever you are. My name is Harry Ngoma. Again, just to repeat the introduction, I'm the USAID point of contact between DT Global and the mission here in Zambia. So I work hand in hand with the Chief of Party, the Deputy Chief of Party, and the rest of the staff in ensuring that the implementation plan as designed, goes accordingly, and we are reporting on the progress. So when we set up to do this project, we knew that, of course, it was about changing the policies to some extent and bringing in the private sector to dialogue with the government that are the major drivers of policy in the country. And we did, in our back of our minds, know that we needed to have local actors so that once the funding, the program wraps up in 5 years, those conversations should continue, those processes of dialogue and continuous engagement between private sector and the government and civil society should continue. So in our design, we did insist on the putting a matrix in terms of the evaluation criteria to say if you're the local entity, you had the local entity in your consortium, you got certain marks, and this is how we ended up with the DT Global getting this award because of the number of local partners that they brought on board, which we felt that maybe would be respected by the government as a dialogue as well. As a mission, we have set ourselves a vision in terms of interpreting the agency priority of localization. We want by 2025, for example, to ensure that we have capacities, processes, and partnerships and programs in place that facilitate greater local actors' leadership in defining the priorities that we should be working in and ensuring that locals lead the development agendas, they're involved directly in designing, implementing, and also even evaluating USAID programs. What we expect to see at the end of all these efforts is really that we should have created a space for local stakeholders to influence our strategic planning. So I can speak, for example, we are currently engaged in preparing a strategy for the Feed the Future because Zambia was last year selected as part of the target Feed the Future global food security countries. And to do that, we need to prepare a strategy. And in this preparation effort, we have been engaging with stakeholders, and we basically went to hear their voices, what are their priorities, and in so doing, we want to ensure that what we speak to is what they really crave in terms of solutions. We would also like actors to contribute solutions, and we also want to ensure that local actors define their priorities. And at the end of it, we want local communities to own the results. And in this specific example of the business enabling project, it's very incumbent upon government to take this process that we're engaging in as helping them deliver on their promises to the Zambian people in terms of improving the business environment in the country, and for the private sector to grow as drivers of the economy. So we are very passionate about that, and in support of this localization target, for example, USAID Zambia reached out to over 70 organizations in the country, both USAID partners that are working currently with USAID and others that have not. We basically wanted to understand in which practices they're interested in and what they viewed as their main barriers to engaging with USAID. And from that assessment, we got responses from about 16 of those partners. What they suggested in terms of areas where we need to invest in to lower the barriers included increasing the interface with the local NGOs by appointing relationship managers. So within the mission, we have appointed individuals that are supposed to be advancing this localization agenda. And then we have also decentralized the project management functions. So what I mean by this is that, like for the health program, for example, they have appointed provincial officers, as most of you are aware. USAID operates at the capital level, at the capital cities of the countries, and we tend as managers to just stay in the embassy. But with this localization agenda, we have opened some provincial offices to ensure that, functions of project management are closer to the project sites and we interact more with the stakeholders. And creating more transparent communication channels is so important, so that local prospective partners know who they should contact at USAID. And so this is really the vision of the mission, and we are currently doing a lot of communication. We're doing roadshows with the private sector and all others to communicate more broadly what we're doing as USAID. And we are also trying to lower the logistical barriers for them to engage. And so coming to the business enabling project, really, as Garcia, Rosemary outlined, it's easier said than done. And so it's a lot of effort to work with local partners because they need to have systems in place. The issues of reporting reporting is basically reflects what the project is doing. If you're not communicating effectively, your story is not taught very well. So we need very, backstopping from HQ staff and so, like, when you're doing localization, those are all the areas that you need a lot of energy to ensure that they're up to speed, of course. And then we, of course, lowered some requirements, for example, using the fixed awards to ensure that even local teams can play a role. And I'm excited to say that I think so far we seem to be heading in the right direction. And we hope that in the next couple of years, we'll have successful stories to share with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Harry. And I imagine, Kabwe, now as a local organization, how are you looking at this localization approach? How does that resonate within Zambia?
Thank you very much, Rosemary, and good evening and good afternoon to all who are participating in this workshop. Indeed, localization has been a very good opportunity for a number of us institutions, locally based institutions like Hydrangea. It has been a joy actually to work very closely with institutions like DT Global and USAID, in the sense that it has given us opportunity to graduate from merely working as subcontractors who are collecting data, which is then processed elsewhere, and then interventions are made within the communities where we live. But what we have seen is that with the partnership and relationship that we have had so far for over 8 months now, working with DT Global and the USAID Business Enabling Project, it has enabled us as an organization and as team members as well to actively participate not only in the data collection and stakeholder engagement, but also in the development of practical solutions that take into consideration the context of the communities that we live in ourselves and the challenges that are faced by people that relate with us, in the sense that we understand what they are going through And therefore, even when we are working on some of these projects, it actually brings in that sense of ownership and the effectiveness in the way projects are implemented. Now, just to mention a bit, Rosemary, about our work with the Business Enabling Project, Hydrangea has been working on the gender analysis of the business environment in Zambia. And what we have been working on is to understand, doing really an in-depth study of the challenges that enterprises, businesses in the energy sector, trade, tourism, and agriculture are facing, and the challenges that disproportionately affect women that are women-led businesses and women that are operating in these value chains. And in our work with the Business Enabling Project, what we have seen is that there's been a lot of co-creation of solutions and interventions. Ones that when we engage with our communities and the stakeholders, actually has brought out that high level of sustainability, and what is coming out solutions that are more sustainable and practical in the context of the communities that we are living in. So localization has been a great opportunity for us to really not only showcase our expertise, but also to co-create solutions, to have knowledge sharing as well. You know, when you look at subjects like gender inclusion, and also, for example, participation in public-private dialogue, like Shupi mentioned earlier on, these are very, very sensitive issues in the culture that would have in countries like Zambia. So when you bring in stakeholders like ourselves, consultancy and experts that are local, you find that it's easier because we relate very well with the culture, we understand and fully are able to share insights in terms of what is happening within the communities. But very importantly as well, Rosemary, what we have seen is a lot of skills transfer, in the sense that we have been learning a lot as well from institutions like DT Global and USAID. As an example, while we have been working on this gender analysis of the business environment in Zambia, we have a fully dedicated technical expert that has been working with us. What we have seen is that they have been able to provide very good quality assurance support to our teams, and they have been able to provide and share insights in terms of how we can be able to improve the quality of our deliverables, and ensuring that we are not only thinking in terms of the context that we have been used to, but we are able to look at state-of-the-art technologies, state-of-the-art ideas and research, which has been able to enhance the quality of the interventions or initiatives that would come out of our work. So it has been a joy and a lot of learning, and it's always, we believe that this is actually an opportunity for us as a local institution to be able to grow and enhance our expertise. Thank you.
Kabwe, thank you so much. It seems that you have accomplished a lot in the short 1 year of the project, and yet I can't, you know, the reality is that localization is a long-term process. So
Yes.
maybe I can ask you, how does Hydrangea look at the next 5 years? What are your goals? What goals do you have in mind?
Thank you very much, Rosemary. So one of the key things, and I'm glad that Shupi and Harry alluded to this, it's enhancing two important things. One is the technical capacities of our organization. Like I've just mentioned, I mentioned a few minutes ago, as we co-create solutions, as we interact with the likes of the USAID, we have been improving our how we manage our processes in terms of reporting on our the usage of funds, as an example, reporting on the activities that we are focusing on, and this has helped to enhance the performance of our organization. And very interestingly, Rosemary, because of this enhanced technical capacity and the general management of our organization, it has actually brought a lot of visibility for our company, in the sense that now we are attracting attention or interest from organizations that would do maybe a year ago wouldn't have paid attention to an organization like ours. So when we look at our relationship and in terms of growth over a 5-year horizon, we are looking at growth in terms of capacity, technically, and also managing of our institutions, then managing of processes within our institution. But another important point maybe worth emphasizing is that it also aligns very well with our aspirations to do program management for institutions like USAID. Like I mentioned earlier on, we used to play as an organization, we have been in existence for close to 10 years now. And most of the work before involved only small components of the big projects that were happening. But now with what we are doing, for example, with DT Global in the USAID Business Enabling Project, we are participating more and more in the actual implementation of project and program activities. And that in itself, it shows the growth that we anticipate, and which is actually putting us on a very good trajectory and giving us an opportunity to not only support short-term activities, but also to look at transformative development in the long term. So those are our aspirations when we look at a 5-year horizon and beyond, mostly focusing on the program management and ensuring that there is sustainability, and we are there to continue with most of the projects and initiatives that are being put in place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kabwe. And nothing that anybody does that is different. Like suppose when you start something different, you need to change people's minds, right? You need to bring them all on board. And when you do that, it always brings challenges. So I guess I need to go to Shupi and then to Harry. Like what are the greatest challenges you faced this past year in kind of changing the way we do things?
Thank you so much, Rosemary. That's a loaded question. I'm just trying to think. Yeah. So as Kabwe has alluded to, there are positives and of course negatives. So one of the challenges really has been hydrangea is one of the best ones that we have, but there are others whom I will not mention. So for those ones where the backstopping has to be more intense, then in the end, you end up wasting time. Like you think, okay, if we had gotten KPMG, this would have been done in 1 week, you know? So just that length of time, because we usually do our work plans, of course, in 12 months. And then if because of that protracted learning, and as I said, I'm also learning on the processes, so I delayed. Then supposing I need to then coach a firm or an individual even much more, then the whole process takes so long. So that's a challenge. But obviously then it becomes better as we go. So that is one of them. And as you also said on the mindset change, you know, the whole, I'll look at it long term. Like the whole issue of localization is good, and I embrace it so much as a practicing development economist. But mindset doesn't change that quickly. So I'll give you a very simple example, which I've seen over the years, and I see it even now. There are doors which I can open, you know, because I'm local and all that, and have this experience. But there are other doors because of perceptions that are closed, and they can be opened by someone who's an expert coming from outside. Because of perceptions, when they see that person, immediately they see knowledge. Even if I could have more knowledge, then they'll also see money, but it's a budget, and I also have that access. So certain doors will automatically open, which will be good because of the partnership. But I just wonder that, okay, supposing the experts were not there, would these doors have opened? So it's a mindset issue. So it takes a while. Yeah, so those are the two interesting ones that I've seen, that it takes time. Yeah, and also lastly, I always talk about this with reforms. Maybe other things like in health are different, but with reforms, Rosemary, it's also about trust. So you don't just come on the scene, whether local or not, and say, we can help with these reforms. One, it has to be demand driven. Then two, you have to build the trust. People have to trust that you are genuine and you really are interested in the growth. So there's that suspicion. First of all, they'll be suspicious of the donor regardless, like what's in it for them? And then they'll also be suspicious of you. So the building of relationships and trust also takes time. So in the end, everything takes time. But I think as we go, it will get better, especially if the process is continuous, because reforms are supposed to be continuous. I submit, Rose.
Thank you so much, Shupi. What about Harry? What challenges have you seen from the USAID perspective?
No, thank you very much. I think the experiences really are varied, but I think with the leadership that we have in the mission, which has encouraged us to be more engaging with the community, with our APs, it's kind of making our work a little bit more engaging than before. I think when we had kind of restrictions in terms of what you can say as a USAID representative or what you can't say, and with that, I think we have now more space to engage with the our subs, so local entities and government officials. And as I said, it seems the government is also willing to accept, because I mean the new donor administration is basically very much open. They want to try new ideas, and so far I think the experiences are positive. Yeah.
That's really great. Well, we have a little bit of time to actually take some questions from the audience. And the first question was basically, which I think is directed to Shupi. So what areas does your private sector work cover in Zambia? And where do you see the biggest potential?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So very quickly, we're based in Lusaka, and we deal mostly with government institutions and the apex bodies of the private sector. They are all based in Lusaka. So we deal with those at the national level. But what we've done as a project is that the project also looks at the voice of the private sector in the rural areas, because our project is also biased towards the growth and especially the voice of the private sector in the provinces. So we have 10 provinces in Zambia, of course, Lusaka being one. So from the other 9 provinces, we've selected Southern Province, Central and Eastern Province to get the voice of the private sector there. And in terms of potential, there's greater potential there because we recently did a study, which we're yet to launch. We just finished the validations. We discovered that in the provinces, the platforms are really non-existent, and where they exist, they're extremely weak. So that means that the voice of the private sector there is not then cascaded to the national level and vice versa. So there's great potential to strengthen those, so that ultimately, as I said in the beginning, that it's all about inclusive growth. So you can only have inclusive growth if the voice of the private sector is included. So that's where the potential is. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shupi. And our question number 2 is, I think, is directed towards Harry, because it basically says, have you noticed any tensions between USAID Zambia's decentralization work and localization goals of engaging government stakeholders at a design stage? And decentralization has so many benefits, but it's much harder to coordinate with dozens of smaller administrative units.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I mean, I just came back from the field last week, where we, as I said, we are coming up with a strategy for the future. we're engaging with our district stakeholders in the agricultural sector, but also even the local government authority. And you might just bring it to your attention that decentralization is at the center of the current administration of the UPND that came into office in 2021. And to do that, they have relied so much on one of the USAID supported projects, which is looking at local impact governance. And at the center there is really decentralization. And what has happened so far is that government is putting a lot of resources at the local entities, at the district councils, through what they call a constituency development fund. And that fund is supposed to provide resources to the different needs that arise from these wards or communities, whether it's agriculture or education or health or water and sanitation. It addresses that. And so what we have noticed is that each district develops its own integrated development plan, and we as USAID have been at least provided those plans, and we look at those plans and then see how we can align with them, with their priorities. And so there hasn't really been any tension in terms of the decentralized plans with the national plans per se. So far, I think it's working well.
Thank you, Harry. And the next question is also for you, Harry. Basically, people are curious about the USAID Zambia enabling localization model. It says, Harry, if I understood correctly, the mission assigned a relationship manager to certain CSOs. And then if they're awarded, they'll also have a separate AOR CORs? Question. And can you speak more about that?
Okay. Yes, so I mean, as a standard approach, of course, of managing these projects or activities is through the AOR or the COR. I think you know them, agreement officer representative for grants or cooperative agreements, or contracting officer representative for contracts. So those are the ones that basically perform the activities of managing the program with the IP. But in addition to that, within the mission itself, each team has appointed a localization person that is supposed to be addressing all these questions. This has just been done in the last few months, and the impact of that team is yet to be seen. But what I can say is that for our health colleagues that have been kind of in the forefront more than ourselves, is that for them, they have got provincial staff that work especially with the government, because as you might know, health is largely, our health programs largely go through the host government. And so we have USAID staff in the provinces, that work directly with the local governments there, the health line ministries in the districts to ensure that the programs run smoothly. So that's the model as of now, which is working very well. But with the team that is at HQ here, is yet really to demonstrate its value addition, but I think we have to do a lot of learning along the way and see how that works. But the key person so far already is to the AOR and the COR. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harry. So the next question basically says, localization is certainly a long-term process. Glad to hear what you're doing in Zambia. Do you consider that the localization process is more challenging when you need to improve, strengthen capacity simultaneously than implementing? Is that quite important to prioritize actions regarding localization and its dimensions? I guess that's for Shupi.
Yes. Yes. The answer is yes. It is challenging to do both. As I said, you'd really want to hit the ground running and do what you need to do, but to what end? You need to look at the long-term perspective and do it rather slowly, but in a more sustainable way, because obviously it's all about sustainability. And also personally, I usually like to give myself as an example. there are some projects that I've done through other donors where you are in charge of a project and you actually work alone, you know, and you do everything, and on the ground, you do the technical work, then all the procurement is done outside the country. You just concentrate on the technical work. And for that, you know, like you're in charge of the technical. But for this one, because localization also has to do with me as an individual. So it was quite hard, you know, to work in an office for the first time with 14 people, you know, then there's admin, then you have to deal with human resource, and you also have to deal with Harry, though he's a nice person, you have to deal with USAID Zambia, then with Rosemary, you know, DT Global HQ. So I was just like, what? You know, but in the end, can you imagine I'll be a wholly grounded person, and then I can take on, you know, bigger challenges and bigger projects. So it's more holistic, but at first it looks like, oh my God. But so it is with dealing with hydrangea. You'll be like, oh no, we should just do this ourselves. But then what? That's the issue. Right. So it is challenging, but we have to do it.
Thank you so much, Shupi. And that brings us to our next question, which is basically the amount of resources that it takes, right? And you've already been alluding to it in regards to the amount of effort. And I can give you my perspective. Maybe it's my running away from my moderator role, but I think that the capacity training that needs to happen locally is not only on the technical side, it's also on the operational side. And that's the biggest gap that we see. And it takes a great deal of resources. So if there are USAID folks out there designing and localization is their primary focus within their efforts, I would say you need to allocate resources for this capacity training to take place. And we're very lucky that Zambia took this, leaned in very strongly, and that we're able to do this. So, but maybe Harry, you have comments in regards to how implementing partners would need to plan for resources in order for local capacity building to happen.
Yes, and I think once an award is made and to local entities, there's usually provision for funds, a budget to ensure that the areas which were assessed as weak areas, you know, before the award was made, can be addressed. And USAID does provide within the award amounts, does allow, you know, capacity building funds to be part of that award. And it is happening already. We have very strong support teams, whether in the finance management aspects or the contracting aspect, which our contracting office also provides training to all these IPs. Yeah, so it's all rounded. I mean, the support that USAID provides is all there, both human resources as well as funds, to ensure that the training does happen, the capacity building does happen. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Harry. And we have a final question from the audience. It says, there's tensions between the US government's use of volunteers to keep budgets down and to drive for localization. How do we move away from this model and create more sustainable methods of employment than volunteers and projects? I think that's Harry.
Well, that's yeah. I mean, that's that's a real challenge. I mean, with most of these programs, whether it's in the health sector or in the agriculture sector, the use of volunteers is very common to as part of the delivery mechanisms in terms of what you want to achieve, whether you're doing poverty reduction or improving nutrition outcomes or health outcomes in these communities. But I don't think USAID specifies that you should be using volunteers. I think when we issue out you know, an RFP, it really depends on the responses of the implementing partner, the potential implementing partners, in terms of how they want to do the last mile reach to households or communities. But I don't think the intention is that we should be using volunteers to subsidize operations of projects like that USAID funds. Where volunteers are being used, I think usually it's usually part of the government systems, like in agriculture, for example, it's part of the agricultural extension systems that enable the very high number of farmers to one extension worker to be kind of more manageable. And I think it's the same even for nutrition outreach programs, you know, because there are very few health workers in the communities and they rely on these volunteers. Yeah.
Well, Harry, thank you. Thank you so much for the answer. And I wanted to thank everybody for their time. And Kabwe, I think I have a lot more questions in regards to your future in Zambia as a company, as a provider of international development efforts. But I think we'll reserve that and see what happens with the project. I'm really very proud to be part of DT Global's effort in localization. And I love the way we're leaning in. I just want to thank you so much for being in the panel, and just really great. Have a great evening, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.